strikes at what's wrong. But on this night, we do what we want. We make our own rules. This is our night. This is
our show.
On this night, we rise.
This is the bleeding edge of science, technology, and ethics. This is
Pollution, unwilling to submit.
We learn all that is learnable.
Tonight, power shifts. Tonight, we raise our instruments of anarchy.
Peaceful coexistence, encryption, software, secure devices, and our minds.
Tonight, we are unbound by law.
It's time for Sovryn Tech. And now your host, the golden stallion of the tech world, the rated R radio star, Brian Sovryn.
When the doctor asked the Golden Stallion, have you had any action down there? The Golden Stallion said, Doc, you better go grab some more charts for your clipboard because this is going to be a long story. Woo! It is time for Sovryn Tech, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, ready to rock him out. Let's do it. Oh, man. Woo, what an episode we had last weekend. Did I raise some eyebrows? Got some interesting messages from people say, what? Oh, no Ethereum. Oh. It was just hysteria. You'd think I had insulted somebody's religion or something last week. That's what it sounded like to me. Anyway, woo. Let's get in to tons to cover this weekend. In fact, I'll tell you something. The opening story, I'm going to go down a road I haven't gone down in a good long while. We're going to get into the weird and the strange. And then we've got other great stories to get into. Just a jam-packed, loaded episode. And in case you happen to be hearing this, of course, this comes out every Saturday. Been coming out every Saturday for 4 fucking years, baby. Nothing but the best. In case you're hearing this, this weekend, of course, today is June 25th, and you're like, where's the Golden Stallion at PorcFest, at the Porcupine Freedom Festival? I am not there. I told you I wouldn't be there. No way am I going to, no, not doing it. So I am not there. If you're looking for me, baby, you're not going to find me. Okay? Maybe I'll have a Sovryn Fest or something sometime. Who the hell knows? But anyway, yeah, not part of the program with that. Not when you have people running events that seem to just want to micromanage and ban every little goddamn thing. Forget it. All right. Let's get into the random access. Just letting you know, I know I've been there for years. I've been going for years now. Last year we had a great time. Had a packed house for the live Sovryn Tech, which is still a video of that, by the way, and I'm going to get that out there. Total thanks to the great Ryan Taylor for that. It was an awesome time. I think it was actually kind of a draw for a lot of people, to come and see that. Unfortunately, not this year. Snooze, you lose. All right. Wow. All right. I'm going to start talking about something that this goes against, to some degree, my general open source principles. But the browser wars, as in, Edge versus Firefox versus Opera versus Chrome, go down the list, versus Cupzilla versus SeaMonkey, right? There was a little bit of a heat up this week in the news, and that was that Microsoft Edge was claiming to offer a significant amount more of battery life on your laptop than any other browser. Certainly more than Chrome. I think Chrome was the worst of the bunch, which, that's not a hard guess, and we've already known that, especially the way it runs on Windows in particular. On other OSs, it's a different story. And of course, we are talking about, machines loaded with Windows, because that's the only thing that can run Microsoft Edge, unless you're in a VM or something. And I think Firefox was the next worst, then Opera, and then Edge as far as battery life, and they didn't, but really look into any others. Now, Opera, most people might think, why the hell did they even bring in Opera into the matter? And that's really because Opera does take a lot of pride in its lack of data usage and in its lack of battery draining. They've taken pride in that for some years. So I think Microsoft probably felt, and granted, this was an inside test done by Microsoft themselves, so you can question that there however you want. But yeah, I mean, I can understand why they brought Opera into the mix. Now, I'll just say outright, first off, using Windows is a battery drain. Okay, I'm not knocking anybody that uses Windows. I have a Windows laptop. I'm just saying that, other machines too, but I'm just saying that, yes, Windows is a battery drain in and of itself, and that could be a concern. Because Google Chrome has so many, I forget, it runs something to do with cycling. I don't remember the specifics on why Google Chrome and Windows in particular is such a battery drain. It's also a battery drain on OS X. But in Linux, as I understand it, it's not so much of an issue, at least on Ubuntu. But I remember with Mac laptops, there was something to the effect of a 40% battery drain. As in it drains your battery 40% faster than anything else. Now, of course, that's not breaking into, of course, Apple's own Safari, but it does kind of, lend itself to a point. So I have 2 points to make with this whole story about battery life drain on laptops. And it's important. I mean, I like to be very mobile. I'd like to get great battery life. My Acer CloudBook 14, I get 16 hours of this thing, but I'll tell you, I get 16 hours probably because I'm not running Google Chrome, nor would I ever. But anyway, the point I want to bring up, the first point, is that this is what I call software minimalism, talked about it many times on Sovryn Tech. When you use the software that something comes with, generally the hardware is optimized for, or the OS is optimized for using the software that automatically, comes out of the box, as they would say. So using Microsoft Edge, Windows 10 is already, ready to go with Microsoft Edge. Now, Edge sucks on a million other levels, it doesn't have extensions unless you're on the Windows Insider ring, but they have that anniversary update, which theoretically comes out July 29th. It's going to come out in July, but July 29th that was the original release date of Windows 10. So they have a huge update, kind of like a service pack, though in many ways kind of a new OS. Now that understand, Microsoft is not going to release another version of Windows. Well, that's not exactly true. I've talked about Midori in the past that I think is going to be coming, which will be a paid-for subscription OS. That's my own theory. But by and large, Windows 10 is it. It is the last version of Windows. So they're just going to keep, incrementally updating, much like, Apple does with Mac OS. Yes, it's now called Mac OS. It's not OS 10 anymore. And so, if you have Edge, and with the anniversary update, Edge is going to have extensions like ad blockers, LastPass, all that different stuff. Okay, so maybe then you'll find it to be more practical. I've noticed on some laptops it's very fast. On other laptops, for no apparent reason that it's certainly not due to lack of specs, it is very slow. Microsoft Edge is very slow. So it's a browser that's still very much in the works a year later, which is not a good thing, but it is what it is. And also, admittedly, Edge was, I think, next to Google Chrome, it was the most secure web browser at Pwn to Own this past year. So all things to consider. I'm not recommending using Microsoft stuff. I'm just laying it out as it is. But that's kind of my point of software minimalism, is that, an OS is ready to use Microsoft Edge. It will make the best work of it. Just like in Mac OS, using Safari makes a shit ton of sense because, the whole operating system is in many ways based around Safari. It's designed to really use Safari very well. You can do a lot of IFTTT stuff or, whatever else you want to do, a lot of automation. And so I mean, definitely, I've always recommended that if you are using a MacBook or a Mac Pro or an iMac, whatever, or, you know, an iPhone, use Safari. There's never, when it comes to Apple's, it's never even been a question for me as to what web browser someone should use. But I get asked this question a lot about, you know, what web browser do you recommend and all of that. Now, if you're using a Windows machine, I mean, to some degree, why not use Edge? I mean, you're already using Windows. If you're concerned about privacy, you're using Windows 10. Come on. Okay. You know, there's that. I thought it was an interesting metrics. Now, I do want to say, though, and this is where I kind of go, this is what I meant by, you know, kind of going against my open source recommendations. I recently started testing out Opera again because it did have some battery saving features and some other features that I thought were interesting. Also data saving features, like if you're tethering or something like this. And I wanted to check it out and see how it works. Also, you know, I mentioned that Acer CloudBook 14. Now this only has 2 gig of RAM. Okay. So a lot of web browsers don't work very well kind of just from that, especially if you open more than like 1 or 2 tabs. Chrome certainly works like crap on it. Firefox is a little bit sloshy. The best, up until I tried out Opera, the best, web browser that didn't use a lot of resources that I could find was Pale Moon, which I love Pale Moon anyway. I don't mind recommending that, you know, no matter what. The only problem is that Pale Moon doesn't use GPM very well, GPM being Google Play Music. Okay, so, I mean, these are the things that I test out. You know, I put it under, GPM is one of the most intensive websites out there. Okay, so, you know, this is how I find out what's actually good and what's not and what I can recommend to you. But Opera uses the Blink engine, same web engine as Google Chrome. Used to use WebKit, which that's what Safari uses and what Chrome used to be. But it uses the Blink engine, does it very well. But it's effectively using Opera now is very much like using, it's just like using a really light version of Google Chrome. Now you could say I could use Chromium. Yes, I understand that. Okay. But Opera, you know, the unique thing with Opera, this is what's really interesting is Opera has its own add-on system. Okay. Much like the Chrome Web Store. And you can, those extensions include ones that say the Chrome Web Store doesn't allow for. Like the Chrome Web Store doesn't allow you to install extensions that allow you to download videos from YouTube. That is not the case on Opera. Also, you have uBlock Origin. Actually, there's by the same guy that makes uBlock Origin, he has a couple of other apps or a couple other extensions available on Opera than is available even on Google Chrome. uBlock Origin is definitely the best ad blocker as far as web browsers go, on the planet. No question from me on that. So that's there. All the things you can, password managers, there's even a native NPass. Not saying I totally recommend NPass, but that's one of the popular ones out there. Of course, LastPass and 1Password and others. All this stuff, is available with Opera. And then there's an extension you can add on that allows you to use Chrome extensions. You can't use Chrome apps, but you can use Google Chrome extensions. And so then you can run, Google Play Music Midnight and, all these different, all these other extensions that are available there. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation without all the Google cruft. But Opera is not completely open source. I used to, and this isn't new for Sovereign Tech listeners, for years I used Opera. I used Opera back when it was this web browser you had to pay for. That was a long time ago. But I loved the Presto web engine. Or browser engine. I just thought that was fantastic. Opera used to be the only web browser in town like that was really on top of web standards and really making sure it's compatible with like everyone on the fucking planet. So like effectively when people were, this used to be a thing on the internet. When, you'd go to a website, it would say this website is optimized for Internet Explorer, or this website is optimized for Firefox, or you'd even go to a website and you had to choose what version of the website you wanted to see based upon what web browser you were using. As to where Opera just took it all. It didn't matter what the website was. It could handle anything that was thrown at it. So I used Opera for a very long time. It was my browser of choice. But now, I mean, I'm just looking at it, and Opera is available on pretty much every operating system on the planet. Even FreeBSD uses Opera. But it's slick for what it is. It's certainly, if you're using Google Chrome, I would have no qualms recommending Opera to you. Definitely, Firefox and IceCat and stuff like that, SeaMonkey, are better, because they're open source. But I'm just saying, I've been using Opera, and I mean, it is fast, especially on a low end machine. It is really, really quick. And it has all those extension capabilities that I think are really interesting. So, and I talked about recently, there was kind of an offshoot of Opera, actually done by the guy that created Opera, called Vivaldi. That was also an interesting web browser. And so my overall point in telling you all this is that the browser wars really aren't over. I know a lot of people want to talk about, and there's usage statistics and all this stuff, and you can believe them as far as you want, that say, well, the number one web browser is Google Chrome now, followed by Internet Explorer. I mean, come on. How much meaning do those metrics have when they tell you that the second most popular web browser out there is Internet Explorer? Now, that's because of, enterprise situations. I understand that. Okay. But let's just be clear that those don't really reflect the real world. And I think in the real world, the browser wars, I mean, they're not done. They're not done yet. Anybody can move in at any time. I don't believe the narrative that gets pushed out there, that it's all just Chrome and Firefox. Opera's serious. And the battery saver thing is actually, I mean, it works really, really well. In Microsoft's defense, because Opera pretty much said that Microsoft was full of shit, claiming that Edge gets better battery life. But to Microsoft's defense, I mean, whether Opera was right in their claims that Opera was actually the best one, that was only true when Opera had all of its battery saving features turned on, which, created a quote unquote lesser web experience. As for Microsoft Edge, was just running raw, no extensions, nothing. I mean, I think Opera even had an ad blocker running, to get the incredible times that Opera was touting. So, kudos for that ability, but, keep in mind that really comes from software minimalism, to where, you're using something that is baked in and makes the most efficient use of the OS itself. And that's the real key there. I definitely, more so than downloading really secure apps and all that, I recommend software minimalism as a kind of a computer use philosophy more than anything else. Use what's there, if you want to. Unless you really know what you're doing, then you know how to optimize shit. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, more or less use what's there, and that way, because the more software you add on, the more exploits you're allowing for, the more gateways you're allowing for, the more accounts you make, the more accounts you have to get hacked or cracked. Software minimalism is a fine thing. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into some more stories here. Here's a fun one, and talk about one I thought this was fucking hilarious. But there was a guy, Chris Olsen, who he works for a startup, I think, called Replicant. And there was this past week, Instagram surpassed 500 million signups. Okay, now those aren't daily users. I think it was like 300 million daily users, which is still amazing. But 500 million, signups, users, whatever. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, Facebook owns Instagram, wanted to celebrate this, and he made this little picture of him at his desk, and it has him like with this kind of physical, it looks like an Instagram kind of, picture box, whatever. And in this picture, you see his desk, and there have been, research has been done. Is this actually his desk? And it is a desk, at the very least, that he's used in the past to take other pictures of himself. And his laptop's on the desk. And this is where things get interesting. And other people have claimed, other people have done the research to say, yes, this is likely his laptop. It's a MacBook. Okay, whatever. Say about that what you want. Certainly people can make, cracks about that stuff. But what's really interesting is the story around what's on this MacBook. When you look at it, and credit to Chris Olsen for looking at this and doing the deep dive of research on this, his webcam on his MacBook has tape over it. Now that's enough. We could stop right there and talk about that, because I can tell you personally, I've been putting tape over my webcams for as long as I've had a webcam. And we're talking over a decade, or around a decade. And people used to say I was nuts. Even inside of tech companies that I've worked at, they'd look at you like, what the hell? What are you doing this for? Now, granted, I mean, I had some bolstering because there's that famous story, I think it was out of a Pennsylvania school. This would have been back in 07 or 08, something like that, where a public school was giving out laptops to kids, and then the superintendent of the school system was actually spying and looking into kids' bedrooms. He was able to spy through their webcams. Okay. I mean, that was, in my opinion, I was doing it before that story came out, but that was proof enough, in my opinion, 10 years ago almost 10 years ago to put, tape over your webcam. But I was, people were called insane for having tape over their webcams. Really, people were. What's the big idea here? Who cares and blah, blah, blah. Then there was a story, which we actually covered on Sovryn Tech maybe 2 years ago, where Yahoo, or where they found out that a guy, wherever he logged into with his Yahoo mail, the FBI was able to kind of track him with that login info, and was able to remotely, without even turning the light on, was able to remotely turn on, the webcam wherever this guy was that they were following. More concerning, still, people thought it was crazy. I've had people say, it's like, wow, that is some serious paranoia if you are covering, your webcam on your laptop. Now, I'm pretty sure that somewhere there's a list that has covering webcams with tape as some kind of mark that you're a terrorist or you're some kind of troublemaker. Okay, that perhaps it is even a sign of psychosis. I'm pretty sure that's out there, and I wouldn't have to do much research to find it. So, I wrote about this at the Dark Android blog at darkandroid.info. I said, so can we now all admit that Mark Zuckerberg is insane, that he is a paranoiac, that he has lost his mind? Because not only did he cover his webcam with tape, he covered his 1/8 headphone jack on his MacBook with tape. He doesn't want anybody putting, and you couldn't see it in the picture, but I would put good money on it that his USB ports or, Lightning or whatever ports are on there were also covered with tape. I mean, this guy is crazy. Who the fuck in this world? I mean, with the NSA, with the U.S. government protecting you, who needs this kind of security on their machine? We are constantly told as consumers, and as citizens, quote unquote, if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you have to hide? What are you concerned about? What are you worried about? You don't have to worry about this stuff. You don't have to cover up your webcam. Come on. The FBI needs it to see terrorists and all this stuff, right? Holy shit, the double, obviously, I'm being sarcastic here. The clear double standard that you get out of Silicon Valley, particularly from Mark Zuckerberg. Now, understand, I get it, okay? Mark Zuckerberg, he has to, at the very least, be concerned about corporate espionage. I could go down a laundry list of very practical reasons, for the security of his own company and his own safety, why he would need to do this, okay? I get that. But then everybody should be doing this because everybody has the same concerns, in my opinion. We live in a world that is just replete and covered by tyrannical regimes called governments. Of course, and not just governments, but corporatism, corporations that work in concert with these governments that are just constantly trampling upon your liberties. Everybody should be covering all their shit like this. But for some reason, when Mark Zuckerberg has all that shit covered up, when Mark Zuckerberg is, doing actually, and credit to him, great security practices on his laptop, he doesn't get any shit for it. But if you do it, you're on a terror watch list, Jack. What a bunch of shit. And I was going to say, how ironic from a guy, that being Mark Zuckerberg, how ironic that for a guy that his entire company is based around the fact that, be very open, be more freewheeling, don't be securing stuff, blah, 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 and don't even get started on the fact that you can access Facebook through Tor, all that shit, and Moxie, and Signal Protocol. It's all a honeypot. Okay? How ironic that he is incredibly locked down in what he does. but he doesn't want you to be that way. That's just like the same thing. It's like, oh, no, you don't need physical storage. You don't need any, Blu-rays are dead, blah, blah, blah. But then yet Facebook, how do they store everything that they collect? They put it on Blu-rays. The fucking double standard you get out of Silicon Valley, and I mean that term in the abstract, okay, is mind-boggling. It should concern every consumer because they are running off of the principles, do as I say, not as I fucking do. And Zuckerberg proved the point. Everybody should be concerned about privacy the way that Mark Zuckerberg is, in my opinion. Everybody should be insane and paranoid. Now, some people, I wrote that article and it actually got quite a bit of shares. It went around pretty good. Some people said, Stallion, hey, aren't you worried that, that might be libel and that someone might sue you or something like this? Please, Zuck, make me famous. Go for it. Fucking sue me. Make me famous, baby. Because I'm going to tell everybody exactly what I just said. And then people are going to go, hey. So, no, not worried about it. Also, I heard, I'll tell you a great story. I know a guy who, this is hilarious. I know a guy who, someone he knew, okay, I'll keep this very broad, was getting sued by Facebook for something he was developing, okay? And the guy, so what this guy did, who was getting sued by Facebook, is he legally changed his name to Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, and this is kind of a popular story or a famous story. So that way, if, Facebook decided to go forward with the suit, it would say Facebook versus Mark Zuckerberg. And that's a PR fucking nightmare, right? So Facebook dropped the whole case. I mean, that's brilliant. I love playing those fucking games on these giant ass bullshit companies. Oh, baby. So anyway, I think it's hilarious. So the next time somebody gives you, if anybody ever gives you shit about, taping over your ports, taping over your webcam. Oh, and I'll finish, doing any of that. You just tell them, I'm just doing what Mark Zuckerberg would do. Straight up. And you could show them the picture. Okay. Also, real quick, this was interesting too, is they also noticed that on Mark Zuckerberg's MacBook, he had, you have the dock in OS or Mac OS. And on that, very few pieces of software. Interestingly, one of them was Google Chrome. I'm not going to go there. Okay. But one of them was Thunderbird. There was only like five apps in his dock, but one of them was Thunderbird. Now, you ask me, the only reason today that I think anybody uses Thunderbird is because of Enigmail. Because Enigmail, which is an extension for Thunderbird, makes, Mozilla Thunderbird, the email client, makes it very easy for you to use PGP. I think that Zuck is using PGP right and left. Okay? I mean, that's what I think. But again, the irony, because this is coming from a guy who, is like, oh, be open. Oh, we're experiencing content collapse. You got to tell us more unique stuff, blah, blah, blah. Tell us. Don't hide anything. Give us everything. Tag your pictures, all that. And yet here he is using PGP. I don't think that's a stretch. Otherwise, I cannot understand why you'd use Thunderbird instead of some like web UI. And that's the other thing. Oh yeah, just use the web interface. The web interface is easy, blah, blah, blah. But yet that, here you have the guy who's in charge of one of the biggest companies on the planet and he's using Thunderbird. Man, that double standard, that fucking double standard out of, the corporate of Silicon Valley. Unbelievable. All right. I have other rant to get to, and I still want to get to the lead story here. An update on the DAO, which is what we talked about last week. Now it is confirmed, as I understand it, that there was no bad code situation with the DAO. The DAO, of course, is this distributed autonomous organization built on top of the Ethereum platform / blockchain, which was all about creating various organizations on top of it that run autonomously and that run through voter holdings. Anyway, I won't get into the if you want to listen to last week's episode where I talk about all that, please do. But the update is that actually the thief, quote unquote, was not a thief at all. he totally used the DAO in the way that it was designed, and he acquired, a ton of, millions of dollars out of doing it that way. I heard an interview with Anthony Diorio, who's one of the co-founders of Ethereum, and he's been on Sovryn Tech before in the past, and he said that he came right out and said this guy was not a thief. This was not theft. This was using the DAO as is. He wasn't saying that he didn't feel bad for anybody that lost money out of the deal. But he was, he made it very clear. So, this is pretty much coming, right from one of the big, voices in Ethereum. This was not theft. There was no theft, that happened here. And this raises, a pretty serious point for me. And actually I got to give credit to the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy about this point. Cause she made it was that, with smart contracts and all of this stuff, it's like, the idea is that supposedly it's going to automate things. It's going to make things easier. Yeah. But anybody that wants to do a smart contract, if they want to make, be secure in the contract that they created, they're going to effectively have to be like a lawyer. They're going to have to, know code and all this different stuff just so goddamn well to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen. And when you're talking about $150 million, for most people, look, $1 million is life-changing for people, let alone $150 million. Okay. So you're not really making society or interactions any more efficient. You're just kind of requiring everybody to be, to be a lawyer now. And that sucks. I'm not trying to insult lawyers. I'm just saying that sucks. Like, that's making life so much harder to have to be that. But that's clearly the message sent by the DAO. I was almost tempted. I heard on an episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin recently, I was almost tempted to include the clip in the show where Adam Levine, who is, I understand it, was not against the idea of smart contracts and all the rest of it. He said he doesn't know. He was really, he was kind of having a crisis of conscience. Well, maybe that's not the best term, but he was questioning whether or not humanity's ready for smart contracts or if this can ever work out very well. That was kind of the gist of what he was saying. And if I'm not interpreting him right, please, Adam, you can correct me. You're welcome to come on the show. But there it is. But that all of this just bolsters what I've said, is that smart contracts. In fact, there was another, my tweet about complexity that got written up it got used in a really popular Medium post by somebody. And his whole point is that either you've got to really know what you're doing as far as the code, or you're going to have some kind of masters. You're going to have some kind of enforcement body, that can guarantee more or less what you write up in the code. And that's always been my concern, is that eventually you're going to have some kind of enforcement body out of this. And when does that not become government? So I feel like, all the information, because I think a lot of people, and actually people emailed me saying, we're going to find out that actually, everything that you've been saying is not exactly accurate. That we'll find out that there was very simple reasons for a lot of this happening, blah, blah, blah. No, all of the, once we find out more information about what happened with the DAO failure, all the information coming out is bolstering everything I've been saying for years on this show. Smart contracts is a bullshit idea. Nobody asked for them. Nobody wants them. And really, who did? And they are not going to work. They are just going to be a system that I think is going to create, or potentially could just create some other, form of something that ends up becoming a government, more or less. And as an anarchist myself, obviously, I don't want that. I don't want that at all. So I actually got some other emails from people that were very gracious, pretty much agreeing with what I said, and said that they were on board with Ethereum, kind of tentatively, and they didn't agree with my position on it. And now they do agree. I'm not here to convince you of shit. Again, the reason I do Sovryn Tech is my opinions are not voiced. And that is painfully obvious by a lot of the emails I got about the DAO. Because most people they sounded just downright offended, and like they had some kind of religious fervor about it. That's scary to me. So anyway, enough of that. Whoo. Okay. What other story? This was all right. So I read, before we get into the main story this week, I read a really, really interesting Right up by John C. Dvorak, a guy I actually have a lot of respect for. And I've been reading him since I was a teenager. He's one of the original tech journalists in many ways. And he did a write-up for PC Magazine, and it was his recommendation that Apple should take the Mac line, as in their computers, MacBook, Mac Pro, all of that, iMac even, and just spin it off into a completely separate company. Just turn it into something else. Maybe kind of like, even though this isn't true anymore, to some degree, Xbox was its own company under Microsoft, to some degree. But that's changing because now Xbox is effectively just a Windows 10 computer. We'll talk more about that during Game Talk. But I was really intrigued by what he had to say. Maybe I'll put the link in the show notes for episode 181. Ooh, episode 181, closing in on 200. He made this case that if they spun the company off, he said, because they're not concentrating on it. Apple is entirely, they are iPhone and iPad, blah, blah, blah. That's all they do. They really haven't updated many of the MacBooks in over a year. I talked about this, it was either last week or the week before, or it was last week with the WWDC, where the Mac Pro, is over 3 years old now. That's, I don't mind that computers you don't need to buy a new one every year, blah, 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 and all of this. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. I support that you don't have to buy a new one every year. But the fact that they're not keeping up with so much of the, really relevant and new developments, in the computer industry, in the PC industry in general, is a problem, is concerning. And so I thought it was a fascinating concept. The idea of Mac becoming its own company. And then, Mac could try some new things, could get away from having to concentrate on how does this work with iPhone and, and the iPad and all that. I thought it was I never thought about it. I thought it was a great idea. It's probably not going to happen, but you could really make Mac really interesting again. That was what I was thinking after reading it. It's like, yeah, this could get exciting. You could open certain aspects of it up. There's a ton of stuff to do with it that I think are fantastic. And most, a lot of the stuff to where they are trying to, I guess I'll say iOS-ize, Macs have been abject failures to most people. The power of Mac, in my opinion, has always been the fact that it's based off of BSD. And uses that kind of at its core. And, all of those aspects, and just, but take that, spin it off, get it away from the rest of Apple, get it away from the rest of those expectations, and just make great computers. I thought that was a really cool notion. So you can look up that story, or, you could just type in John C. Dvorak MacBook in DuckDuckGo or something, and I'm sure it'll come up. Last one, and then we'll get into, We'll get into the strange this week on Sovryn Tech. But Pluto, now it is being theorized and just shy of being definitive fact, thanks to the new pictures from the New Horizons probe, which have been really exciting over the past few months. Pluto, that is the one-time planet of the solar system, now just a dwarf planet, apparently could have a subsurface ocean, much like Europa and Enceladus and some others. This is pretty cool. Now, the reason that they theorize that there is a subsurface ocean on Pluto, and again, this is a show about science and tech. It's not all tech, folks. But I think this is really cool. So the reason that they think this is because Pluto is a very lively little celestial body. It's doing a lot. Like, there's volcanoes, there's all different, ice volcanoes. There's all different kinds of things going on there. But there's you don't really have tectonic shift. You don't have all these, markers of what allows for a very lively and active planet. These things do not exist on Pluto. And it's particularly interesting because it's happening so far away from the sun, which, can often power a lot of the, more geographic activity, or geological activity, I should say, on a planet. So what's causing all of this? Why are there ripples in the ice? Why does there appear to be so much action on the planet. And the theory goes is that underneath there might be liquid water. There's a liquid ocean that is causing all of these shifts and causing all of this stuff to occur, even these ice volcanoes and all the rest of it. Obviously there's a core there, to the dwarf planet. But yeah, the theory goes is that there's a subsurface ocean. Now, why does this sort of thing excite me? I'll tell you why I love hearing about subsurface oceans, and particularly in bodies within our solar system. First off, I don't think we're ever going to leave our solar system, or at least we're not going to do it in a very practical fashion to where, it's a normal thing to do. I think the laws of physics call the shot on that. Okay. Not new for Sovryn Tech listeners. I've talked about that many times. It's also why I don't think aliens have ever visited the Earth. I'm not saying there isn't life out there. I'm sure there is somewhere. Okay. I definitely believe in simple life being all over the place, but as far as complex sapient life, as I've said many times, and people argue with me often on Sovryn Tech about that, I don't, and that's totally fine. I love the conversation. I don't think that the aliens have ever even, have ever come to Earth, unless they were on Mars or something, at some point in the past. But anyway, the excitement is that, I'm a big proponent of colonizing, for lack of a better term, the solar system, our solar system, hit up Ceres, go to Mars, put stuff on the moon, let's go to Europa, go to Enceladus, go to Titan, go to Io, go to, now perhaps even go to Pluto. And what's really exciting is that a lot of the technologies for, traveling through space that get developed today or are in the works today work just as well in oceans. Like you're kind of getting you're kind of killing two birds with one stone as far as what you are able to traverse and navigate and inhabit when you develop for space. And so what could be really cool is just creating throughout our solar system, not throughout the universe or the galaxy. I don't think that's going to happen, but within our own solar system. Yeah, I think you could have, underwater habitats, that could work very well, on all of these, even now, perhaps as far away as Pluto. I think that's so cool. But this isn't space talk. I'm not going to get into that for a long time here. Let's get into our lead story, because this is really, really interesting. And please keep in mind, as I said, I don't think aliens have ever come to Earth. So don't give me any of this when you hear about this. All right. Don't give me any of that. All right, let's do it. So now the source of this story, I just want to talk about that for a second. Okay. Is a website called ancient-origins.net. Now I want to be real clear. I am fully, and I think I've mentioned this on Sovryn Tech before. I am fully aware that some websites on the internet, you gotta really check their sources. You gotta really question, what they're talking about, their write up, and because they'll go into all kinds of crazy. Now, Ancient Origins will go into all kinds of crazy here and there, but I have to admit, as somebody that spends a lot of time researching history, and I say this all the time, I'm a gamer first, a historian second, I'm a tech journalist third, or a tech pundit, whatever you want to call me. Okay. But sometimes they do really, really solid work. There's sites that I'd write off. Like there's that site Collective Evolution that I can't believe anybody shares anything from. That site is such a clusterfuck, such a fucking mess. People share memes from it. I mean, it's terrible. There's sites like that I would, totally steer clear from. and actually I've spent a lot of time debunking stories that they've done. But Ancient Origins is one where, I'd be willing to take the time, to see if it's right, because sometimes the stuff they write up is just fantastic. And this is one of their more interesting ones, that I want to talk about. And like I said, we're going into the realm of the strange, but we always, like Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I go by that. I am totally skeptical, of a lot of the stuff, but this is interesting enough that I want to talk about it. And I think you'll enjoy it. People love it when I get into history on the show. But this is, again, from Ancient Origins. In 1665, many said they saw a UFO battle and fell sick afterwards. Let's read the story here. On April 8th, 1665, around 2 p.m., fishermen anchored near Berhoft, then in Sweden, now in Germany, reported seeing ships in the sky battling each other. After the battle, a dark object hovered in the sky. Quote, after a while, out of the sky came a flat, round form like a plate, looking like the big hat of a man. Its color was that of the darkening moon, and it hovered right over the church of St. Nikolai. There it remained stationary until the evening. The fishermen, worried to death, didn't want to look further at the spectacle and buried their faces in their hands. On the following days, they fell sick with trembling all over and pain in head and limbs. Many scholarly people thought a lot about that, wrote Erasmus Francisci in Der Wunderlich Übersag and Sovryn. I'm doing that terrible. In 1689, we'll just go there. Francisci had gathered news reports from 1665 related to the event. The scholarly people, quote unquote, who considered the event and the illness could not discern the causes. In the June 2015 edition of Edge Science magazine, Chris Albeck and Martin Scho detail their investigation of the event. Albeck is the founder of the historical research group Magnolia Exchange, an international archival project and a prolific writer on the subject of UFOs as cultural history. Scho is a research associate for the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. Albeck and Scho looked at various possible explanations for the phenomenon. They ruled out certain celestial phenomena. The angle of the sun described in accounts would preclude an ice halo, for example. Now, an ice halo, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But an ice halo, you may have heard of it. It's like a sundog. That's also what they're called, where ice crystals in the sky create sort of this weird effect where the sun appears to have a halo, or, there could be lights on either side of the sun. It creates this really, really wild shape. If you've never seen them, look up sundogs. It's really pretty, but definitely very odd. So they ruled out that it's a sundog. Let's read on. Could it have been a mirage? A fata morgana is a fata morgana, I think that's how you say that, is a kind of mirage that appears just above the horizon when the right mix of thermal layers is present in the air. The mirage shifts frequently and can sometimes make it look like there are ships in the sky just above the horizon. The 1665 event was described as occurring higher in the sky than a fata morgana would appear. A mirage also would not explain the plate or hat-shaped object that was said to remain into the evening, as fata morgana do not remain stable for so long. And if you go to the link in the show notes, you can get an example of some fata morganas from Australia and other places. Could it have been a flock of birds? The battle, the quote-unquote battle, seems to have started with the appearance of a flock of birds. Albeck and Scho summarized the accounts. Quote, a large flock of birds appeared in the heavens. After moving in unison for a time, they formed a shape like a long passage in a house, end quote. This became, quote-unquote, this became a warship that seemed to approach from the north, followed by countless other vessels. Then another group of large ships came from the south, heading northeast. Fire and smoke ensued as the two main ships sent cannonballs whizzing at each other. Of course, this is based upon how people in 1665 would have described it. Cannonballs, let's see. Whizzing at each other, terrifying the fishermen down below. The ship from the north then retreated, came back, and headed south. Two other fleets appeared from the west and the east with smaller ships. When the smoke cleared, the fishermen could make out the broken masts of the southern fleet, and a man dressed in brown clothes, a hat beneath one arm, and his left hand by his side, watching the crew working and running. I mean, very descriptive of what the hell is going on here. An unusually large flock of starlings may have resembled such a scene. Albeck and Scho said, flocks sometimes merge together in startlingly well-defined masses that move in patterns before settling down. Perhaps in the spring of 1665, more starlings than usual were pushed by uncommon weather to move west of the Baltic to their summer breeding grounds. A flock would still not account for the dark object that stayed in the sky until nightfall. Is it possible two unusual phenomena occurred at once, one producing the scene of the battle and another producing the mysterious hovering object in the sky? Albeck and Scho say it is, quote, a remarkable case and, true or not, ought to be considered among the first alleged flying saucer sightings in history, end quote. So that's the effective story there. Now, as I said, and I don't know how I can make this any more clear to people, I do not believe that aliens ever visited the Earth, at least not aliens from Alpha Centauri or some far off place. If there was alien life on Mars, maybe. Okay. But that's a big maybe. Right. So I don't get into this whole ancient astronaut theory. I don't believe in, ancient aliens, blah, 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 blah. I don't buy any of that. Okay. Now, however, this is particularly interesting. And during this time, during this kind of era, this was not the only sighting of that kind. There was another. And this one happened in Nuremberg, actually, or more accurately, was reported in Nuremberg about 100 years previous, almost to the year. And this happened in 1561. Now, this one was really crazy. And we have not just a description, but we have what at the time newspapers were what were called woodcuts, because literally it was something cut out of wood. It was very fine work, and there would be some artistry with it. And then, the story would be underneath the artistry. Looked very similar to, you could argue it looks very similar to the modern blog post. It was just done on a hunk of wood. And these were, this was serious stuff. This is how you reported things. This was journalism of the day, with woodcuts, particularly in Germany. So, in that whole area, depending on what belonged to what, where, when. So in Nuremberg, there was this report of cigar-shaped, and lots of people saw this, cigar-shaped ships, they claimed at the time, but not just cigar-shaped, also crosses and circular discs. So you had multiple types of seemingly flying craft that were described by residents in Nuremberg in 1561. Very similar to what you hear about in 1665, in what is now, a part of Sweden. So this is, when you get a bunch of stories like this, out of Barhoft, Nuremberg, or at least even when you just get a couple, well, maybe you want to stop and say, okay, what the hell's going on here? Now, the easy case that a lot of people want to bring up, and of course why it was written up instantly, or was kind of the first explanation to sort of write off about the Barhoft case, are sundogs. And that's generally what a lot of people want to say everybody was collectively seeing in Nuremberg in 1561, because otherwise, the description is awfully strange. You're ending up, you've got effectively a case of Star Wars here. You have X-Wings, you have giant Star Destroyers. In almost, in fact, like I said, the cross-shaped ships look kind of like X-Wings. Okay. You've got this, this wild woodcut, that describes all this, just like you have the wild story out of Barhoft. As far as, what exactly did they see? Was it just these sundogs? But part of the problem with that, particularly with the Barhoft story, is that, again, the disc stayed there forever. It wasn't a mirage. No, the stuff was there too long. Now, I think a lot of people want to say, well, come on, we're talking about, just barely coming into the Renaissance or the Enlightenment, and, people were very spiritual, and so they just wrote the stuff down all as an act of God. Now, to some degree, that's true. Okay, because a lot of people, with the case with Nuremberg in 1561, people took that as a sign from God, this battle in the sky, this UFO battle that they saw. And let's be clear, UFO is just unidentified flying object. It doesn't have to be alien, right? If you want to be particular. This UFO battle in the sky, they took it as a sign that, we should invade Turkey. Literally, that's what they need to go after the Turks. That's how they interpreted that. Much like when Constantine the Great, hundreds of years before, he claimed to have seen a cross in the sky and thought he heard Jesus say, "In my name, conquer." And he goes on to do his business with, the Roman Empire and eventually the Byzantine Empire, right? That's certainly where the spiritual aspect came in, is that they took it as a sign of doing something. But where I think people write off our ancestors a little too quickly is that, keep in mind, this was a major time, particularly, 1561 and 1665, that whole 100-year span was a time of real reformation. It was a time where, people were wanting to be very accurate. Lots of questions were being asked. I think people our ancestors get written off as dumb far too quickly. Quite the opposite. At the time, even religious people, particularly monks and the rest, were hyper vigilant about being very accurate, very explicit about what they saw, particularly in the sky. Because keep in mind, people weren't looking down at their phones or anything like that. Okay, people would look up at the sky and they used what they saw in the sky. I mean, this was true as far as humans using signs in the sky, be it, where a constellation is and stuff like that, to use that as actual bearing, if you're going, if you're exploring, going on a sea voyage of some kind, or even, just doing farming and things like this, all of this stuff was really paid attention to up until maybe the past 50 years, was all very serious. And, most people could point out and tell you, what star was this one, what planet was that, and, there's Jupiter there, and all this stuff. So I think you're writing people off if you just want to say that they had some kind of crazy religious notion. They did in what they thought it meant, but I don't think so in what they saw. I think they saw something, and I think they described it accurately. Okay, and this is just one of many cases throughout history where, these are just a couple of cases throughout history where people, said they saw some kind of, perhaps a battle in the sky or things like this. Folks, you got to understand that, again, up until maybe the last 50 years, paying attention to the weather, paying attention to nature in general was absolute. You had to be, it was a requirement for survival. You had to pay attention. Maybe the past 100 years, but whatever. We're talking 400, 500 years ago. You had to pay attention to this stuff. You couldn't make shit up. Otherwise, that effectively, you could make up some shit, obviously, like religion. But in many cases, it meant death if you didn't pay attention or if you went around, making up bullshit that you saw in the sky. So I think there was something here. I think these people that lived 400, 500 years ago, I think they did see something. I don't think they saw a sundog, an ice halo or a mirage or anything like that. Something was going on. Now, what was that something that was going on? Well, that's where we get into, you can guess, okay? You can make claims, or not claims, but you can, that's it. You can guess. That's all you can do. Otherwise, there's no evidence really, to kind of go either way. I would think that the evidence stands against the idea that it was aliens, from some far off world. I think the evidence very much stands against that. Could it have been the flock of birds? Well, again, that falls into, all this stuff appeared for far too long. And certainly the cigar shaped and all the different, the battle that was seen in Nuremberg in 1561, no way. I think it's pretty clear that was not birds. So I think the evidence stands against that it was aliens. I think the evidence stands that, yes, these people really saw something in the sky. And there's been other cases of this too. There even in the United States up to 50 years ago. There was a name of a movie, I think Battle of Los Angeles, that was based around, one of these potential sightings where, the U.S. Army, or the National Guard, I should say, had to, break out the howitzers and everything because they thought that there was some kind of invasion from the sky coming and all this. And what the hell were they seeing? So I'll lay out for you another potential theory. Okay. And again, there isn't a whole lot of evidence. There's evidence that stands against some of these possibilities, but there isn't enough evidence to say any of them are absolutely 100% accurate. Though I would say that the evidence that they saw something, I'd put it in the 90 percentiles. But you don't have to believe me on that if you don't want to. So many people seem to want to think that, people 400, 500 years ago, or even thousands of years ago were morons. Not at all. IQ is a bullshit metric, and I don't agree with that assessment. And there's evidence, it's certainly 100% evidence against a lot of that. But what if, all right, we're having fun here. This is speculation. I am not saying this is fact. What if there were, I saw a video that talked about humans in prehistory, and it was trying to explain what humans were like in prehistory. And the video this video that I watched, it was a straight up documentary video, and it wasn't done by any ancient alien groups. It was done by, very, very serious scientific organization, was laying out that we really have no clue what, prehistory was like for human beings. We don't have a whole lot of that. And in that, I wonder, was there a chapter to human history? I've talked about this before. Was there a chapter to human history that we don't know about? Perhaps a fairly advanced chapter of human history. Perhaps, balloon ships or, some technology, like you consider Zeppelins, and things like this, that really aren't that hard to do for people that haven't moved far off from stone knives and bearskins. What if these sorts of, airships using, again, balloon technology, right? What if that's not something that was invented in the 18th and 19th century? What if it was invented a long, long time ago by somebody, and whoever this group happens to be, might have been flying over Nuremberg or Belhof there, because one of those ships actually crashed in Nuremberg, and that, oh boy, what came from that? How come nobody, that's the other part of this, how come nobody found this crash site? Wouldn't people have talked about it? Well, what if they didn't find anybody, or they didn't run into any aliens, or they didn't find anything because the technology being used didn't look, as far as structurally, didn't look very different from the technology of the day, being based on wood and cloth and all this different stuff, perhaps iron and whatever else. And what if the people that crashed didn't look all that different from everyone else around? I wonder, what if there was some kind of civilization just a little more advanced, or maybe a lot more advanced, but it was a human civilization that was on Earth, and they happen to be, unfortunately, so they're not that at least socially advanced where they're still fighting wars. They had a battle in the sky that everybody at the time got to see. Something to think about. Definitely went into the strange, but I think that's an answer that most people never cared to explore. And on Sovereign Tech, I love to get into the things that no one else is saying. I'll be back with more. You're listening to Sovereign Tech. Woo, hey. You want to talk about some history, okay? But this isn't strange history. This is a little more solid history. Solid as in solid gold, baby. Woo! If you want to get your hands on some great gold, silver, platinum, palladium, whatever, great coins, the whole thing. This company runs the gamut as far as what you can get your hands on. Okay, I want you to check out Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. Tim Fry is there. He has been in charge of the business, I think over a decade now. And he is also, but the company's been around since 1977. You might have heard my interview with him. He is one of us. Tech geek all the way. Loves him some Liberty, baby. Woo! He is the real deal. And he is ready to take... there's lots of ways you can buy from Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, but one of the best, his personal favorite, is to use Bitcoin. He is a Bitcoin preferred business because he knows it makes those transactions easy. You want to get in on this. If you want to secure your wealth, you talk about decentralization, cold storage, right? It doesn't get more cold than gold, baby. All right. So you want to get your hands on this. All right. Go to gold.zog.ninja. Okay, gold.zog.ninja, or you can go to rrbi.co and just let them know the Golden Stallion sent you to get golden, baby. All right, you can do that, and they will hook you up. They'll even buy gold and silver from you. Okay, there's a lot of options to go there. They are one of the best businesses on the planet, hands down. Gold.zog.ninja. Check it out. Let's get back to Sovereign Tech. Pixel, I'm being chased by assassin bots. I need an exit. Pixel!
Boy and Sovryn, come with me if you want to live.
Who are you?
I'm Adelaide. I'll tell you more later. Get in the vehicle.
Get in a car with a scantily clad and beautiful woman? Guess it's been my first choice before. Let's go.
First choice.
It is time for First Choice, where I cover the stories that get sent in to me through the various channels available. Of course, go to zog.ninja. You can go to contact.zog.ninja to send in those stories. And I actually shortened this up. I'm not going to be getting into a story, but I do want to say, I don't say this enough. To all of the sponsors of Sovereign Tech, thank you so much. You make this show happen, particularly Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. Again, gold.zog.ninja. That'll take you right to them. It's a real honor to have them support the show. So, folks, when you go through these sponsors, believe me, like that helps Sovryn Tech in the end. It's an easy way to help Sovryn Tech and to get your hands on great stuff. Like gold and silver. Okay. So thank you so much for the support from Robertson Brokerage, and other sponsors. And of course, if you want to be a sponsor, just get in touch with me. Go to that contact.zog.ninja. Okay. And just say, hey, I'd love to, support the show, advertise on the show, whatever. And I do multi-month plans. I mean, believe me, it's worth your time. I am reaching out to, we're getting into some pretty high numbers here. Okay. We're in the 5-digit, we're rocking. All right. On Sovryn Tech. So you're going to get in touch with a lot of very passionate people that are big on tech, but are also big on practicality and on personal freedom. Okay. So there's a market for everybody here with whatever you want to, get out to people. So please, if you want to, just get in touch with me, go to that contact.zog.ninja. And there's plenty of ways to get in touch with me if you want to sponsor Sovryn Tech, and really honored to have you in the ranks of our great sponsors. So anyway, I will not be getting into a story here. I was going to do a part 2. I will save this perhaps for next week. I was going to be doing a part 2 on enhanced humans, which is a very real science that people are talking about. We did an intro to it last week, and we will break into that. Got some interesting responses from people. I had asked for responses. What did they think about enhanced human beings, or IA, which is, intelligence, what was it? Intelligence augmentation, where, not that we're concerned about where the idea is that there's not a concern over artificial intelligence. There's a concern over what happens when you start to augment human intelligence. What happens then? Is that even scarier? So we'll get into that perhaps next week. So I want to say real quick, folks, understand with what I was talking about for the lead story, with what happened in Nuremberg and other places. Okay. I'm not saying that that's fact. I'm not saying I believe that stuff. Okay. I am, that I'm just presenting possibilities, and I am presenting the information that has been laid out there. That's all I was doing. So breathe easy. It kind of sucks. Like I'm actually, I watched the show Ancient Aliens, the lovely hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. It's almost a sport for us. We don't believe 90% of what they say. Okay, even though sometimes they get some guests on there that are actually legit. All right, I watch that stuff, but I don't buy into it at all. I think, and I feel like actually to some degree that show, particularly now, is doing far more harm than good, because anytime you bring up these historical questions, these historical question marks, suddenly people just want to insult you and share a meme of Giorgio Tsoukalos saying aliens or something. It's like, no, sometimes there's some real things to wonder about here.
Billy D. Williams talks about the power of Colt 45.
I've always heard about the power of Colt 45, but I was never sure exactly what that meant, so I got some, found out for myself.
Hey, Billy, you free tonight?
Works every time.
The dynamite taste of Colt 45. It works every time.
Whoa, hey, you want to slow down?
I don't do slow. I move fast.
Okay, well, so you're French.
Everyone in the future speaks French.
Wait. The future?
From 2099, Permanent Autonomous Zone, Osiris-1. You've been there.
Oh, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening. How do I know you're from Osiris-1?
RGP fingerprint Omega 746566666.
Okay, you're legit. Hey, really, be careful. You drive like you're playing a video game.
That is how you programmed me. Game talk.
It is time for Game Talk, where we talk video games, baby. This is a much requested and returned segment of the show. There was probably, shy of 100 episodes, maybe, where we didn't do a game talk, but it was one of the early things I did. And people just kept asking, hey, could you please bring this back? Could you please bring this back? And so I brought it back. Here it is. Okay. Let it never be said that I don't let the listeners, take control of Sovryn Tech here and there, even though really I do the show for me. So Game Talk, which, by the way, you know what? I would love it if there are other shows out there that actually take listener questions and have a rapport with their listeners. Ask those podcasters, why do they do their podcast? I'd be curious what their answer is. I'm not saying that there might be anything wrong with their answer. I'd love to hear it. But anyway, especially ones that aren't like, not like a Joe Rogan or something like that, where, obviously it's kind of become their job, right? To some degree. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get into game talk. A couple of interesting things. First, a quick story. Oculus is in the Oculus Rift, which I don't think it's safe to say that there's any leader in the VR in the virtual reality space right now. But Oculus is definitely, I guess you could argue, they're sort of the Nintendo to HTC's to the HTC Vive's Sega. And they just dropped they had DRM, digital rights management. They had DRM, which forced you, if you were interacting with the Oculus Rift kind of, software ecosystem on a Windows machine, because it's the only thing it runs on, it had DRM that made sure you were using the Oculus Rift headset specifically. And this was kind of controversial, not just kind of, it was very controversial, because the concern is that if you don't open up these platforms, you're going to hinder development for these platforms. Oculus actually, they turned off that DRM. So now, as I understand it, you could use an HTC Vive with Oculus's software, with their software ecosystem, which good. I'm glad they did that, because, that makes, you're going to kill a market if everybody has to go out. Oh, I got to go buy, this $800, headset, and then I got to buy this $800 headset and all of this. I mean, you're going to get in the way. I mean, the longevity of virtual reality is not around the hardware. It's around the software. The longevity of making money off of virtual reality is not in the hardware. Okay, that's really kind of the key thing. It's in the software. And so if, let it break down to who has the best software. Let that be kind of the argument. That's how it was at the console wars. The hardware, was in many ways the same, or at least comparable. It was all about who had the better games and blah, 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 and all that. Let's get it to that. And when everything's based around the PC, it's really kind of dumb to try and sell them, the hardware of the PC as well, which is where it differs from the console, kind of the console wars of the 90s. All right. So I think, good on Oculus for doing this. Seriously, I think that's great. Also, the HTC, or, Steam, I should say, or Valve, the company Valve, which runs Steam, which is the largest gaming platform on the planet. Gabe Newell has come out, who is, he's the spokesman anyway for Valve, came out and said that he will be offering money to developers he will front money for development of virtual reality software if they will not make it, for just one ecosystem. Like, if you don't just develop for Oculus, if you develop for all of the virtual reality ecosystems, including Steam and others, Gabe Newell is effectively saying Valve will pay for your development. That's the simple gist of it. Now, that's a bribe. It's true. A Sovereign Tech listener pointed that out. That is effectively a bribe. But at the same time, I like the idea of people opening all this stuff up. I am excited about these two pieces of news because that means that the virtual reality space is being opened up and being very developer friendly and then also consumer friendly by not forcing them, you're not forcing them by not making it necessary to purchase multiple headsets and all this, and to not have to stick within one ecosystem. Let the great UI, the great UX or whatever, speak for itself, and let the great, I don't know, maybe first party stuff, do its business. I mean, that's how I think it's great. So anyway, enough of that news. I've got another little bit of news here. I thought this was cool. And then I'm going to spend a very brief amount of time in what is, the more interesting news. But I thought this was great. Based upon what I said last week, if you listen to Game Talk last week, I talked about how, with the finding of new games, or of old games, and then porting them onto PC, with emulators or onto phones, whatever. that in many ways, and I talked about, how this is true for music and how there's a bunch of new releases and movies, new Independence Day, blah, 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 all this dream stuff from the 90s, 80s and 90s, how I could effectively, thanks to modern technology, thanks to the future, I could effectively live culturally in the past indefinitely. I could live in the 80s and 90s for all time. And if anything, like even the tools alone, I'm a game developer, the tools alone exist to where I could make new games that look like they're from the 80s and 90s, right? And that's so cool. And to bolster that point that I could do that, just this week, to celebrate the 20th birthday of the classic first, it's kind of the original really 3D, first-person shooter, that being Quake, which is just an awesome game. Had the Trent Reznor soundtrack, the whole thing. That was fantastic. The developers, for the guys that made Wolfenstein: The New Order, as in, Wolfenstein 3D, right? Machine Games, they made an entire new episode, so a whole bunch of new levels for the original Quake, and you can download it. There's a link in the show notes for it. You can download it, and it gives the instructions on how to install it. And if you have the original Quake, rock and roll. You can play some new Quake levels, baby. Does it get any better than that? Even actually, I might have reported on Sovereign Tech to celebrate 20 years of Doom. I think it was last year that John Romero released new levels for the original Doom. Yes, it is absolutely true. You could effectively live in the past forever. Okay, at least culturally. As far as entertainment goes and all that. Oh, it's fucking awesome. And I checked this out. It's good. It's the design is really, really wild, and you can kind of see some modern sensibilities put into it. And that's all right. There's times where I want a purist, nope, you made this game in the 90s, so think like it's the 90s. But there's some modern sensibilities, and I won't go into that, but I think that was really slick. So anyway, let's get into some actual, get into some game talk news here. Or, well, we're already talking news. But now I'm running out of time. Running out of time on the segment. But I do want to quickly talk about the announcements from E3. Now, kind of a common thing, okay, for people to do with E3 is usually, depends on what time frame you're talking about. Back in the day when it was like Sega versus Sony versus Nintendo, whatever, you would ask, okay, which company won E3? And PC games always kind of stand above because, that's sort of the ultimate real gaming platform. And so, it's just not... no one ever says, oh, PC won or something like that. It's just always, it's like, yeah, of course PC won. Welcome to the PC master race, right? And proud member here. So with E3, what company won? I agree with the bulk of the sentiment out there that Microsoft won E3. Everything they were doing was right on. Nintendo, that new Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, I think it's called, that looked nuts. I am so on board for that. And you got to understand, Nintendo not winning E3, even though some of the games that they showed off Pokemon Go and all this stuff, they're going to suck away people's lives as they always do. I've mentioned this on Sovereign Tech before. Nintendo doesn't really, they don't feel a need necessarily even to win. Nintendo's way of thinking, and this has been true for decades, okay? Nintendo's way of thinking is that, they're not in competition with anybody else. You will buy a Nintendo system. You might buy an Xbox. You might buy a PlayStation Neo. I think is that kind of the rumor name going around for the new PlayStation coming out. You might buy one of those, but you're definitely going to buy a Nintendo no matter what. So their way of thinking is that everybody's going to have at least two consoles. That may not actually be true for a lot of people. All right, I understand that because consoles are expensive and you can't afford to buy two of them. But that's really their way of thinking. And I think in many ways that's accurate. And certainly in many parts of the world, that's very, very true. In Japan, it's dead on true. So they're not necessarily out there to win it. And they don't mind, they can show off one or two things that are just mind blowing, which they did this year. And then they move on. But Microsoft, really showed off the stuff. And they made two announcements. And the two announcements some people think are kind of work against each other. So they announced a new Xbox coming out this fall called the Xbox One S, and it's going to be this really slim version of the Xbox One. It will have some improvements over it. And then they also announced what they called Project Scorpio, which is an even more advanced Xbox One that will have VR capabilities and who knows what else, a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, everybody's getting on board with VR. Of course, you have PlayStation VR coming out, and that was shown off, and it looked very exciting at E3 as well. And there might have been some hints at a PlayStation Neo, a new version of the PlayStation, just like Microsoft is coming out with new versions of the Xbox One. I'm of two minds on this stuff, okay? First off, I don't think there's a problem with the Xbox One S and Project Scorpio existing. Interestingly enough, this is what they said is that even though Project Scorpio is going to be significantly more powerful than the Xbox One or the Xbox One S, they said that every game that comes out for Project Scorpio will work also with the Xbox One S and the Xbox One. So if you already own an Xbox One, don't worry. For the next few years, we're like halfway through the generation. Where we're in the 8th generation of consoles. You have these generations, they generally last 7 or so years. Anyway, within that, you can still play any game that comes out. It might just not look as pretty, or maybe there'll be a feature that doesn't exist, perhaps. I don't know. But that's kind of Microsoft's MO. That's what they do, and that's why Windows is still the most used operating system on the planet, because as best as possible, they make everything backwards compatible. I actually applaud them for that. I like that because I like things to have lasting power. Especially when I lay down hundreds of dollars on something, I want it to last me a good long time, as in years, if not decades. And you can kind of argue about the Xbox 360 being of inferior quality and all this stuff, and I get that, but that's not what we're talking about here. So I think this is fine. Project Scorpio, all that stuff sounds very exciting. Again, the Xbox is effectively a dedicated gaming Windows 10 machine. That's really what they've turned into. But I have no issue with that whole idea that they're releasing the Xbox One S and then Project Scorpio. The easy answer, of course, is that the Xbox One S will be able to play Blu-ray. What do they call that? Ultra Blu-rays or whatever, where it's like 4K Blu-rays, and it's going to be the cheapest Ultra Blu-ray player out there, like hands down, because it's only going to cost like $299 or $250 or something like that, and that alone will sell it. That's kind of what sold the PlayStation 2, right? And the PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 2 sold big because it could play DVDs. Like, oh, wow, well, we can get in on this DVD thing, and so it can do that. Just like the PlayStation 3, oh, this is like the original Blu-ray player. We can do that. I know some people that still own their PS3s because it was a Blu-ray player. So they're getting in on that. PlayStation VR was really hot there. No doubt about it. Some of the stuff I saw, some of the Star Wars games that were being played, holy shit, were those beautiful. So pretty exciting stuff coming out of E3, I thought. I didn't think it was a boring E3 at all. I thought everything getting shown off was really cool. The VR, Project Scorpio, the new Zelda, all awesome. I'll be back with more.
Tonight, Knight Rider crashes into your living room.
I don't believe this.
Well, you'd better believe it. A lone crusader for justice drives this crime crasher.
The world's most fantastic car.
And together they can do just about anything.
After all, we're only human.
Don't press your luck.
And now buckle up for action with the fastest show on television, Knight Rider.
See Knight Rider online today. And now back to Sovryn Tech. Pixel says it should be this panel.
We need to hack into the control center to shut down all of those assassin bots.
Well, you're the android. Can't you just jack in?
Oui, but the way I connect is more like a jack off.
Was that a joke?
Hacking is no joke.
Directly connecting certainly beats doing it with the keyboard.
You're notorious for your love of cyber sex.
Okay, now that was a joke. Just get hacking.
A quick hack solves everything. Hacksec.
It is time for Hacksec, where I cover issues around hacking and security. Of course, on this show, hackers are heroes, and when someone does something malicious, we call that cracking. Or we call that person a malicious actor or cracker. But anyway, I know how those jokes go. Real quick, I'll tell you. I just Audacity. Talk about the greatness of great open source software. My computer just crashed and completely rebooted. Fortunately, Audacity saved everything right up until this segment. And so no problem. I just move on. We got done with Game Talk. I did neglect to mention with Game Talk that also there was that amazing Star Trek bridge simulator, which is kind of like Artemis, if you've ever played Artemis, where everybody has a device. It can be an Android device, or they have different screens, and you can actually sit in a room and play together like you're on a bridge of a starship, which is really cool. But that Star Trek simulator, in VR, woo! We're going to talk a little Star Trek, a little bit more Star Trek here later, but man, that was awesome. So anyway, what I want to talk about, I actually have a topic. I don't really have a story this week. I mean, I was kind of inspired by a story that was going around from VentureBeat, which was talking about the rumor has come up once again that the iPhone 7 coming out probably this fall, that the iPhone 7 will be removing the headphone jack. The 1/8 jack, the aux jack, whatever you want to call it, on the phone. And this person at VentureBeat actually wrote up it was a really great story. I don't agree with it 100%, and I'll say where I disagree. But, pretty much said that, hey, getting rid of the 1/8 jack is it's anti-consumer. He said, I think he even said it's shitty. Personally, I thought the guy was writing just like I would, we were saying, oh, this is bullshit, and all this stuff. But this is written by young persons. This isn't somebody like, oh, back in my day, I used to ride on a pony, and all this stuff. I mean, this is written by somebody who's in the space right there, fan of Apple, blah, 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 but just is saying this is crap. And the reasons laid out for it were interesting. But overall, I want to talk about, in this segment here, I want to talk about just the whole idea of not having ports in general. We were talking earlier about how Mark Zuckerberg tapes up everything, his 1/8 jack, his webcam. And even though we can't confirm it, he was likely taping up his USB ports as well. And because there is a certain security around that. Of course, there's the phone, which is a complete and abject failure. And I said, well, sadly now it's years ago and it still never came out, that this would be a failure. And that was the Turing phone. I said it was interesting, but I said it was going to be a failure. And so this is something that a lot of people are shooting for, is to where you can make, if you don't have part of what makes even not just smartphones, but laptops, what makes them a certain thickness is because they have to, you have to fit in, say, a USB port or a 1/8 jack or something like this. And, so it has to be a certain size. You can't get below a certain, you can't get to a certain degree of thinness because of that. This is why I think Apple is obsessed with dongles, because then they can make a proprietary slot of any size and then, just have everything come out. But that was one of the initial concerns over this 1/8 jack, was that, well, all right, so let's talk about this, but I'm going to be talking about ports in a much broader sense anyway. There was the first aspect is, okay, so wait a minute. So if there isn't a 1/8 jack, usually what people ask is, then how the hell do I listen to things? How do I plug in my headphones? Well, you don't. You use Bluetooth headphones. Now, the initial argument here over this, or the reason why some would say this is a bad idea, is because, Bluetooth headphones right now aren't very good. That statement is true. And I agree, it is anti-consumer if you've spent, I don't know, hundreds of dollars on some Bose headphones, which is ironic because Apple owns Bose, or not, I'm sorry, not Bose, Beats. But if you own Bose headphones, same deal. But Beats, like if you spent, I don't know, $300 on a great pair of Beats headphones, and yet you cannot connect them to your iPhone anymore, isn't that bullshit? Yeah, of course it is. Companies can do whatever they want. I'm not saying the company's doing something wrong. Anarcho-capitalist, you hate companies. No. Okay, shut up. That's not true. All right. I'm just saying that, I'm a consumer. I like companies to think about me. And if they don't, I don't buy from them. And that's the ultimate answer here. Fine. Then people stop buying iPhones. There. Fuck. Shut up. All right. Jesus Christ. It drives me nuts when people think it's like, well, it's voluntary. You don't have to put your dollars there. I know. Holy shit. How dumb do you think I am? That doesn't mean we don't talk about this and that it's still not crappy for the average consumer. We still need to cover why you shouldn't buy those things. Fuck. All right. Now that we've, pleased all of the corporatism lovers. All right. So yeah, putting in you won't be able to use these really great headphones perhaps that you bought unless you use a dongle. Now, dongles are a pain in the ass. And I remember the article showing a picture of somebody with their little nice MacBook and, that only has that one port. It doesn't even have a charging port. And they had like this thing hanging off of it with dongle where it's plugging in all this different, it was a fucking mess. And the idea is that it's a mobile solution, but if you have to carry around these dongles with you, it's not very mobile, is it? And so that's an issue right there. And of course, that's an easy way for, Apple to make another $80, right? Kind of like what they did with the MacBook, is if they make a dongle that allows you to charge and plug in a 1/8 jack on the phone. I mean, but yeah, that's a pain in the ass. And also it's a looks, quote unquote, nightmare. It's an aesthetic nightmare, which supposedly that's what Apple's against, are aesthetic nightmares. But I guess that's not true anymore. If this all ends up being true, that they're not going to have a 1/8 jack in it. Okay, so you have that aspect of it. All right. Now, the thing is that with the new versions of Bluetooth coming out, Bluetooth 5, I think you are going to be able to get headphones that work that well. I still don't like the fact that my headphones have to be charged. Okay. Like that, Bluetooth headphones, the best ones last 8 hours, maybe 12. With all the podcasts and all the music I listen to and everything, I need the shit to work nonstop. I cannot afford to have it like where I got to take them off and go charge it. That sucks. Okay, so that's my problem there. But as far as the argument that Bluetooth sound doesn't sound as good, yes, right now that is not true. But I don't think that's going to be true for much longer. Bluetooth 5, the amount of data that it can transmit can interchange, it won't be a problem. In my opinion, I don't think it'll be an issue. That said, also, I don't think most people give a shit. Okay, about sound quality. If people gave a shit about sound quality, they wouldn't be streaming music. They wouldn't be, MP3s wouldn't have been the big deal. FLAC would be the thing, or everybody would be carrying around WAV files or something. The idea of something, I think I might have mentioned this last week, but look, the idea that something is best does in no way mean that it is the winner, that it is the one that people will gravitate towards. In fact, it's generally quite the opposite. Okay. And MP3s aren't even the best at compression. You could say, well, it's the best compression. No, it was just first. That's why MP3s are such a big deal. But bottom line is that people aren't that concerned about the quality of their music. They're more concerned about the convenience. Okay. And Bluetooth, connecting with Bluetooth and not having a wire to worry about, I think that's a very serious convenience. So I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. Granted, like Eddie Trunk, a guy that I just love, who does the Eddie Trunk show, he's been in the metal scene for decades now. He tweeted, I retweeted it. He tweeted that if Apple gets rid of the headphone jack, he's going to Samsung. Like, he's just going to leave and go to Android. I think that's going to be true for a lot of people, that's going to happen. And that's fine. That's good. That's how you solve this problem. Okay. But anyway, just putting it out there that for the average person, I don't think having to wear Bluetooth headphones is going to really be a problem. And I'm sure Beats is going to sell you a great pair of them too. But anyway, you have that argument. The argument that does hold up, that is a problem, and that does need to be considered if we're going into this future where there are no ports, on a device that's coming, is that having a digital port instead of not an auxiliary, instead of an analog port, like a 1/8 jack is, like your standard headphone jack is, you have total control of what gets sent through that port. That's the real danger of doing this, is that DRM, digital rights management, is going to have a field day. If whatever, you have some song on there or something, and whoever pulls the switch to say they don't want you to listen to that, you will not be able to. You are fucked, because everything is going through that digital port. This is a huge issue. I could do a whole show based around this, of digital versus analog. Analog gives you control. Digital, not so much. There's the potential to lose a ton of control that analog could just never, would never allow for, or, would never enable. So that's really something to think about. Okay. Is that when you lose that 1/8 jack, you are handing over control of the sound that, in many ways that could come from your device. And you could say that they can control it at the software level, sure, but at the same time, the software level could also re-enable it, as to where, you could get a player, a third-party player that would allow you to play whatever you have, fuck whatever Apple says, or whatever some, music company says or something. So that's the one that made a ton of sense that, yes, that is a problem. That is where it is anti-consumer, and that is where it is anti-choice, and thus anti-freedom. Okay, DRM is such a terrible thing. If there's one thing we could end right now, oh man, besides government, DRM would be at the top of my list. So that's a genuine issue. Now, why are they doing this? Why are they getting rid of these ports? When it was the case with the Turing phone, not the iPhone, when it was the case with the Turing phone, it was a security issue. In fact, how did they solve the power port? They just had like a mag lock at the bottom of it that connected. So even that, is all, just conductive, powering or charging. And that was all for security. The idea that you didn't have any ports with that. That way nobody could, put something in there that would be a problem. Now, the Turing phone was flawed just from the get-go because they weren't making their own SIM cards in the first place. So, there's a gateway right there into your device anyway. I don't think Apple's doing it for security. They may in the future claim it, as they are trying to be a privacy company, or a pro-privacy company. They may try to claim it as a security thing, because any jack would allow for, some degree of control over a device. Obviously, there's a reason Mark Zuckerberg covers his audio jack. But then you're getting into a whole other slew of areas if they want to claim that it's security. Like, you still have kind of a microphone on that device, and then you could run into a bad BIOS situation where sonically something could get transmitted, kind of like how Google can send URLs through the Chrome web browser sonically. Something could get rewritten and there could be a big problem there. So the argument for it being for security is minimal. I really think that that's an issue. If you want a genuinely secure device, you're going to need to drill the microphone out of it. And I mean that for a lot of reasons, not just, transmitting, not just a bad BIOS situation, but like something where, people could just, the NSA could turn on the microphone and listen to you or something like this. Okay. So I don't buy the security notion. I understand it, but not losing the ports is not any kind of perfect security. I think doing the Zuckerberg and just taping everything up is a little more practical. The reason that Apple's doing this supposedly is to allow for a thinner device. But folks, this is just like smart contracts. Who the fuck's asking for that? I've never run into the person just saying, "Oh, fuck God, I wish this phone was thinner." Really? If that is a concern of yours, I question your priorities on a lot of things. I don't know what's going on in that head, if that's what you're thinking. This is getting crazy. This desire for, thinner, lighter, blah, blah, blah. Like it's getting to the point of negative returns. Like that is where we're at when it comes to this. So I don't buy into that whole, that whole shtick. And I don't agree that, not having an aux jack like that's going to like that the average consumer is going to have an issue with it. They're not going to care. All they're going to say is like, if I don't have an iPhone, I'm not going to get laid. If she sees me holding anything other than an Apple logo, she's going to think I'm poor. That is all that people are concerned about. They are not concerned whatsoever with that, 1/8 jack. I don't think it's going to be an issue. And I mean, I'm excited personally myself. I like the idea, even though this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not. Even though, I don't like Bluetooth headphones because I have to charge them. I actually like them because I look forward to the day when smart watches take over for smartphones. And I think that's going to happen. I really do. But the question quickly becomes like, okay, are you going to run a wire down your arm to connect to the smartwatch? Is the smartwatch going to need a 1/8 jack? No, that's going to run off of Bluetooth. Okay. And I want, one of the reasons I really love smartwatches is because a lot of people might not know this about me, but I am full on with like naturism and nudism. I think clothes are bullshit. Don't give me any shit about the cold. Stop. You think I haven't heard that before? Please. Okay. I think clothes are crap. And the only reason that clothing's still a thing is probably because, the fashion industry would die without it. But smartphones don't work very well in a nudist colony, right? What are you going to attach to? You're going to have to wear a belt or an armband or something. As to where a smartwatch would be a great thing. And, Bluetooth headphones, phenomenal. Great. That solves that whole problem. So that is something that I'm going to make a trade-off at that point. Okay, but that's what I'm saying is that people, Bluetooth headphones are going to deliver great sound in the near future. People are not going to care about that. And honestly, this is if anything, for Apple particularly, this is a slope because I think they're going towards a smartwatch future. This is them kind of pushing in that direction to where you're going to get used to getting your audio through Bluetooth, okay, or wirelessly, whatever shape that takes. All right, that's really what this is about. But the concern is very, very real that you are going to lose, you are going to lose some control potentially of the audio that comes out of your device. Okay, that is absolutely real, and that's why when Apple says this, I don't get excited because they have their OSs are locked down. The real solution here is to have open operating systems, and Android's not even that open anymore, but have CyanogenMod, or if you're doing a smartwatch situation, have like Asteroid OS, right? That's the Linux on a watch. All of these different things. That really solves the problem, is just keep the thing open, and then you can go forward with a lot of these technologies, because then at least you can stop any of this DRM bullshit because you're on an open platform. So open source is always the solution, right? for any of these things, because some of these technological developments aren't that bad. I don't like the fact that I have to charge, my Bluetooth headset, and maybe that'll be a problem for some people. Maybe it won't. But I do see it as, I don't want to say a necessary evil. I mean, battery power can get better. Bluetooth can use less energy. I mean, all of that stuff can happen over time. And then maybe it won't be an issue. If I can get through a day with the headphones, awesome. Then great. And maybe there's already a model out there that can get through a day. Even if the headphones have to be a little bit bigger, put a bigger battery in them. That's fine. No one's asking for more thinness. The place where you do want thinness, and maybe that's what this is all about, is in the smartwatch. That's where maybe some people want thinness, even though I like a gigantic watch on my arm. I like, I don't know, give me one of those things from Fallout 4 or something on my wrist. I don't care. But yeah. So anyway, enough of that. That's the whole idea of no ports being secure. There's some truth to it. But if we're talking, what are you securing against? If you're securing against a state level actor or even a corporation of some kind of massive size, yeah, you need to do a lot more than cover up your, than just covering up ports or not having ports in your device. That's not actual security. So I'd rather have the 1/8 jack than not when it comes to my devices today. Anyway, enough of that. I'll be back with some more Sovryn Tech. We're going to have a good time with the last one.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Adelaide, why are we stopping?
In the future, we have a custom.
What's the custom?
After a successful mission, a team usually has love, a ménage à trois, or orgy.
Yeah, there's only two of us.
I already contacted the others to come join us. I love women too.
Whoa, Adelaide, you're beautiful, but you're an android.
I am fully functional. I am programmed in multiple techniques, a broad variety of...
Wow, I guess so. You did say you move fast. Adelaide, the future is going to be so good.
The climax.
It is time for the climax, where I talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. And this week, I want to talk about Star Trek. Star Trek, maybe, real quick. You just heard an ad for Babylon 5. I've been running an ad for Babylon 5 since episode 1 of Sovryn Tech, and we are episode 181 right now. And I've had people ask me, that might not be so knowledgeable about torrents and all that, how can I get my hands on it? The best torrent software out there, I mean, if you want to just use uTorrent and go with it, it's just the, letter U torrent. Okay, that's a client you can use. I like Qubit Torrent is a personal favorite. And go to cat.cr, kat.cr. Type in, make sure you have an ad blocker on. Type in Babylon 5 and, just click on, there's a little magnetic symbol. Click on that and it'll walk you through the thing. Babylon, it is the greatest show of all time. But my favorite franchise of all time absolutely is Star Trek. I did an article on the Zog blog about why Star Trek will always be better than Star Wars. And it pretty much came down to the fact that, as we've seen recently with developments in Star Wars Rogue One, which is the new Star Wars movie. It's not episode 8. It's a side story that's coming out in December. There were concerns that this movie Rogue One is just too dark. It's too much of a war film, and it's getting into crazy areas. And there's other aspects of it too, where pretty much you have to understand Star Wars is now obviously owned by Disney. It's been owned by Disney for 3-4 years now, and they are not going to let Star Wars go in certain directions. It is so rare that maybe in Lost Stars you had a sex scene. And it wasn't even much of a one. The bottom line is that Star Trek will allow for sex, Into Darkness. Kirk's having a fucking threesome blatantly in Into Darkness. Like, what's going on. And he's rocking it to the Beastie Boys. Woo! Hell yeah, Kirk. And you have Risa, the Pleasure Planet and all this stuff. Star Wars will never go to the depths of the human condition that Star Trek will. Bottom line. Okay, so Star Trek is, I think, objectively better than Star Wars just because it will explore the entire human condition. And there's a lot of news, before I get into what I want to talk about here with Star Trek, I will say a lot of news coming out about the new show. Of course, for those that don't know, also, Anton Yelchin died, at the age of 27. He played Chekhov in the Abrams verse, the last 2 movies of Star Trek, and the one that Star Trek Beyond belongs to, which is technically called the Kelvin timeline, by the way, as in the USS Kelvin from the 2011 film, or was it 2009? Yeah. Anyway, 2009. That's called the Kelvin timeline. He died, very sad. I did a moment of silence at zog.ninja about it. And just a loss of a guy that delivered the goods. And especially if you read the comic books by IDW that take place in the Kelvin timeline, you'd know how powerful a character Chekhov was by the writers, but also that they based a lot of it off of, Anton's just great delivery of the, intelligent delivery of the character. So anyway, that's definitely a real loss. I hate to say anyway on that. 2016 has been a hell of a year for deaths, no question there. So you have Star Trek Beyond coming out. Can't wait for that. July 22nd. It's going to be very exciting. The new show just this past week from Brian Fuller, who is just a great talent as far as production goes. And he is, he's worked with Voyager and other shows, other Star Trek in the past. So it's a good guy to have on board. There were rumors, and I might have talked about it on Sovryn Tech. I have something completely different to talk about. Don't worry, but I just want to get this out there. There were rumors that, or it seemed to be fact, that the new Star Trek show that was going to be airing on CBS and CBS All Access, blah, blah, was going to be taking place between Star Trek 6 and The Next Generation. Like, it would take place in that time between that, and that the show would be an anthology, as in every season would be a completely different story, a completely different crew, perhaps. Now Brian Fuller is saying neither of those facts are true. And again, those were accepted as fact. I forget who they came from exactly, but he's saying no. It is. It will not take. It does not take place during that time frame, and that also no. It is not an anthology show. Now, he did say this is. I'm taking this slightly out of context. Brian Fuller did say that they were looking at high-end sports cars for design language for starships in their show. If they're doing that, I kind of get the sense that this might be a show that actually takes place far into the future of Star Trek. Of Star Trek, not just our future. That's already far in the future. Okay, but of Star Trek, because they're looking at really slick, smooth designs. So I'm open to, there's a potential that it's that. Now there's also the potential that it's going to take place in the Kelvin timeline, even though we thought that it wasn't going to. And I also I feel like, so there was a preview trailer. It didn't show anything. It was a teaser. It's not even a trailer. That said, new adventures, new this, new that. It said new crews, plural. So part of me is kind of thinking that, yes, the original plan was true, that it was going to be an anthology show, because that's why you would have multiple crews, right? He said it's because, well, there's not just one Starfleet crew here that we're going to cover. It'll be a bunch. Maybe that's true. But I kind of get the sense that they changed their mind over what they're going to do here. So anyway, as far as what the new Star Trek show is about, now, honestly, it's all back up in the air. We thought we had a clue. Now we have no clue. What the show is going to be about. There you have it. But my best guess is that based upon a couple things said, it might actually be taking place far into the future, which I'm excited for that. There had been a lot of story treatments for Star Trek, for a new Star Trek series that took place like in the year 3000 and all that. And a lot of them were really cool, where like the Federation doesn't exist anymore because, they fucked up space so much with using warp drive, right? Remember that season, was it season 6? There was that episode of The Next Generation where you found out you couldn't go past warp 5, but then they just ignored that shit. Anyway, whatever. Enough of that. What I really want to talk about with you, got a few minutes here, is I mentioned the Axanar, the Star Trek Axanar. This is a fan production being made, a fan film, that I think I had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on about this. And we were talking about how there was a copyright case, and they were in CBS, Paramount, whoever was saying, holy shit, we're not even, we're suing you, the guys that are making Axanar, because they did it as a Kickstarter and, they made a good amount of money off of doing that and blah, blah, blah. And they said, we're going to sue you. And then J.J. Abrams, about a month ago at an event, said, CBS and Paramount, whatever, they're dropping that suit. Okay, that this was not the way to interact with fans, and that's going to go away. Come to find out, Abrams was full of shit. He was ad-libbing the whole time, and none of that was true. Nobody's dropping the suit, which when I talked about it on Sovryn Tech, I said, I don't know. I feel like this is just PR because they said it'll be going away soon. Say it dropped or forget it. Like otherwise you're just BSing. And it turns out that I was right. He was BSing. I said, maybe this is just PR to make it look good, to not lose sales on Beyond. But then once Beyond did its opening weekend, they would continue on with the lawsuit. Well, they are continuing on with the lawsuit. And part of what they're doing is they are now requiring for Star Trek fan films, they have created guidelines for what a fan film needs to do to not be sued by Paramount/CBS. And here we go. Yeah, clear the throat. Here we go. Here are the guidelines. This is insane. Okay. And someone actually sent this to me, a great guy. He sent it to me and he said, you know what? Somebody needs to break every single one of these, makes a movie that breaks them all. Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but let's read some of them. Okay. Here are the guidelines for making a Star Trek fan film. 1, the fan production must be less than 15 minutes for a single self-contained story, or no more than 2 segments, episodes or parts not to exceed 30 minutes total, with no additional seasons, episodes, parts, sequels, or remakes. So effectively they're saying you cannot make a series out of what you're doing, which this is going to be, I don't understand. Star Trek Renegades, which I've reviewed on this show, Star Trek Renegades is actually being made by a very libertarian guy, a voluntarist guy, Sky Conway. He's producing it. And it's really well done. It has Tim Russ in it from Voyager and Walter Koenig and all that. They are definitely doing more. They've already made a full-on movie. They are recording. I think they should be in production for their next episodes. They are doing a full series. I don't know if they're just ignoring this, which if they are, good on you, Sky, for being an anarchist. Fucking right. But anyway, that's crap. So you can only make something that's 15 minutes long. That's absolute bullshit. Here's number 2. The title of the fan production or any parts cannot include the name Star Trek. However, the title must contain a subtitle with the phrase, quote, a Star Trek fan production, end quote, in plain typeface. So they don't even want you to use, the font or any of the fonts that Star Trek's so well known for. The fan production cannot use the term official in either its title or subtitle or in any marketing, promotions, or social media for the fan production. So even if, like say Star Trek Renegades, they wanted to release a official communicator from Star Trek Renegades, even though it's nothing to, other than it being Star Trek, has nothing to do with, and it's totally different from anything that CBS or Paramount has ever done, you cannot use the word official. Wow. Laying the hammer down, you guys. Number 3. The content in the fan production must be original, not reproductions, recreations, or clips from any Star Trek production. If non-Star Trek third-party content is used, all necessary permissions for any third-party content should be obtained in writing. Number 4, if the fan production uses commercially available Star Trek uniforms, accessories, toys, and props, these items must be official merchandise and not bootleg items or imitations of such commercially available products. So you cannot make your own. You need to buy official products from official licensors through CBS and Paramount. Unbelievable. Number 5, the fan production must be a real quote-unquote fan production, i.e. creators, actors, and all other participants must be amateurs, cannot be compensated for their services, and cannot be currently or previously employed on any Star Trek series, films, productions of DVDs, or with any CBS or Paramount Pictures licensee. So effectively, the way, you got some legal mumbo jumbo here, okay, but what I'm reading here is that if you are an actual editor, say for, I don't know, some company, for Lionsgate or something, you cannot edit a Star Trek fan film because you are a professional. You are not an amateur. This needs to be done by children, effectively, is their point. Number 6, the fan production must be non-commercial, and it goes down a big list on that. I'm going to skip on what that means. Obviously, you can't sell it for profit. That's the point. 7, which, that point, pretty much everybody that does fan films has accepted that you don't profit off of it. You can be compensated to some degree. You can have it pay to do what you want to do. But you cannot profit from making the fan film. Most people run with that and whatever. I don't agree with that. I say make all the money you fucking want, because any fan film of anything is a love letter and it's free marketing. Okay, so I don't agree with that, but whatever. Number 7, here's a doozy. And this is the one people said I would love. The fan production must be family friendly and suitable for public presentation. Videos must not include profanity, nudity, obscenity, pornography, depictions of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or any other harmful or illegal activity, or any material that is offensive, fraudulent, defamatory, libelous, disparaging, sexually explicit, threatening, hateful, or any other inappropriate content. The content of the fan production cannot violate any individual's right of privacy. So pretty much, if Star Trek played under this rule alone, you would not have Star Trek. You would have the worst show in history. Because Star Trek doesn't play by this rule. This one's crazy. And I'll tell you something. If you let me know, if you'd ever want me to make a fan film, hook me up with high 5 digits and I'll make a fan film that would shock the world. It'd be the best 2 hours of Star Trek you'll ever see. I guarantee you that. Okay? I mean it. I would break this one inside of a second. The first 5 minutes would blow number 7 out of the water. There'd be so much sex. Who knows what would be going? Oh, it'd be phenomenal. I'd make the hottest shit you've ever seen. And it'd all take place on a bridge. Woo! Man, I would love to make the movie that breaks all these rules. And like I said earlier with Zuckerberg, Paramount, CBS, come on and sue me, baby. Make me famous. Because I'll show people, and this is what they're really afraid of, I'll show people great Star Trek, not just okay Star Trek, not just, well, that's better than what's been around lately Star Trek like Abrams does or whatever. I'll show you great Star Trek. I'll show you Star Trek that delivers the goods on every count, philosophically, sexually, progressively, whatever their metrics they want to call. I can make great Star Trek. Man, I wish. Contact me if you'd like to fund me. Let's read a couple more here. 8. The fan production must display the following disclaimer in the on-screen credits. Star Trek and all this, blah, blah, blah. We own it. We own your ass. Number 9. Creators of fan productions must not seek to register the works, nor any elements of the works under copyright or trademark law. Well, guess what? Number 9 is the one I agree with. I will not attempt to copyright my works. I don't copyright any of my shit. You do whatever you want to do with it. Rock and roll. You have a good time because I'll tell you, nobody out there is me. Nobody does it like the Golden Stallion. So go ahead and take it, you rock it, you do whatever. Paramount, if I made a movie, you could show it in theaters and you could make all the money off of it because at the end of the day, everybody's going to know who came up with it, and it wasn't you. Number 10, fan productions cannot create or imply any association or endorsement by CBS or Paramount Pictures. Assholes, I wouldn't want to be endorsed by you after the bullshit you're pulling here. Let's all make the great Star Trek movie. Throw some anarchism in it. Let's do the goods. You get in touch with me. Anyway, enough of that. If you do love the show, please don't hesitate to donate to donate.zog.ninja. Carpe Lucem, everybody. Woo! I'll see you on the other side. Go out there, everybody. Break all the rules.
You
Break
just
them all.
experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.